fourth graders. How is everybody today? Thanks so much for coming on in and watching the video. We'll be continuing on with where we left off the other day. So just a little message. Your fourth grade teachers miss you, and we all hope that you're doing well and that you're safe and you're happy and that you're reaching out and seeing some old friends from school. And of course, washing your hands often and also practicing that important social distancing that we keep hearing so much about. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started with our math today. And just like always, we'll take a look at a couple problems together, and then I'll let you have the time that you need to finish that page. We'll do a home connection page today, as well as a student book page today. And from there, it's your job to do the best that you can do, persevere on through it, take the picture of the completed student book page and add it to your math Google slideshow so that your teacher can check in and see how you're doing with your math skills. And of course, if you do have any questions or run into any problems with any of the problems, reach out to your teacher through Google Hangouts or email them, and we'll be happy to dive a little bit deeper into those problems with you. All right, I'll go ahead and get my picture off the screen, just so it's a little bit easier to see everything that we need to see together. And I'll bring our work up today, and we'll go ahead and get started. So in this Unit 7, we're continuing our work with fractions and decimals, and not quite yet with some of our review with multi-digit multiplication. We've really been focusing in on our decimals and decimal fractions, and we'll continue with that today. Today, in session 2, we will be comparing decimal fractions together. Our assignment will be student book page 271, followed by a home connections page 138. Oops, I should have taken off that S there. Sorry about that. So let's take a look at our page together, and I'll scroll down to the very bottom. And this is what you need to be looking for, that you're in the student book page 271. And our paper today is titled Decimal Fractions on Line and Grid. So our first problem up here, we are going to be looking at numbers, decimal numbers, fractions on a number line, a fraction strip rather, and grids down here. So let's get started with problem number 1. Label each marked point on the decimal strip with a fraction. All right, I'm going to go ahead and just underline that because that's going to be important. All of my answers need to be written as a fraction. Use tenths when you can and hundredths when you must. All right, so let's look at our fraction strip. I'm noticing that it is from 0 to 1. I'm also noticing that the fraction strip is divided into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 equal parts. So that marking that I just did in green would show us where our tenths are. And I'm also noticing that it is divided into smaller parts, and that would be hundredths, because here would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, another 10 for 20, another 10 for 30, and so on and so forth. So those little tiny ones are showing us that this fraction strip is also divided up into hundredths. So some of our answers will be fractions with 10 as our denominator, and some of our answers will be fractions with 100 as our denominator. So let's take a look at our first one. Our first one is pointing to this little mark here, which is going to be in hundredths. So from here, I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of my total 100. For B, I'm noticing that it's right on where my number line is divided into tenths. So my denominator is going to be a 10, and this is 1, 2, 3, 4 tenths. You could also write this as 40 hundredths. They would be equivalent, and that would be a correct answer as well. But we're also trying to practice with tenths and hundredths. So here we have our 7 hundredths. Here we have our 4 tenths. I'll stop there for problem 1 and let you use these as an example and figure out C and D on your own. We also, of course, have our answer keys, and that is for you to look and check your math thinking, double check to make sure you're on the right track with your math skills. Let's move on down to problem 2, where we have some different grids, hundredths grids, and we want to write the same numbers that we just worked with up here, the same fractions that we worked with up here. We want to work with them down here now to show them as a fraction, show that same fraction as a decimal number, and to visually display what that fraction looks like. So our problem A, 1A rather, we already know what our fraction is, 7 100ths. And problem B, problem 1B, we also already know what our fraction is. And since we didn't do C and D up here, that's something that when you get that far, you'll do, and then you'll move that down here to our grids as well. All right, continuing on, I'll scroll down so we can see it a little bit better. So here I have my grid of 100. That's why I have my denominator as 100. And I want to shade in 7 out of the 100. So with my pencil or a colored pencil, let's go ahead and shade in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the 100, also known as 7 hundredths. As a decimal number, that would look like this: 0 and 7 hundredths. This in our decimal number is the hundredths place. This in our decimal number is the tenths place. So I would say this as 7 hundredths, and I would say this as 7 hundredths. The 0 here you could have, or you don't have to write it. Either way would be correct. Let's move over to 2B. Here we have 4 tenths. Up top, we talked a little bit about how 4 tenths is also equivalent to 40 hundredths. But we'll go with the 4 tenths to practice that skill as well. Now I know that my denominator is 10, which means I need to have my grid of 100 divided into 10 equal parts. So this whole strip would be 1 tenth, 2 tenths, 3 tenths, 4 tenths, 5 tenths, 6 tenths, 7 tenths, 8 tenths, 9 tenths, and 10 tenths for the whole grid. So I would be shading 4 of the 10. Which would be the same as 40 out of the 100. As a decimal number, 4/10 would look like that. Again, the 0 is not necessary. You could write it there or you don't have to, and it would be correct. This would be read as 4/10, and my decimal number would also be read as 4/10. All right, so I'll have you go ahead after you have looked through the problems that we did together. I'll have you go ahead and continue on and work on 2C and 2D. Problem 3, you're going to go ahead and look at the visual of the grid, and you're going to show what that number could look like in 2 ways, 2 equivalent ways. And write that number also as a decimal to match your fractions. And take a look at B as well. Here's the visual. What is this number represented as a fraction and as a decimal? Then problem 4, why can you write 2 different fractions and decimal numbers for grid A and only one for each for grid B in problem 3 above? So just to give it some thought, you could jot down a sentence or two reflecting on that question down here. There's lots of different right ways to answer this question. See which one makes most sense to you. And then, of course, when this page is completed, please check in on your answer key. And if there were some hiccups or an error here or there, that's what the answer key is there to help you with, to see if you can learn from that and continue on. All right, so that was our student book page, 271. When this page is completed, please take your picture of it. Please take that picture and put it in your Math Google slideshow, and your teacher will take it from there. Now today, you also have a Home Connections page. If we scroll down to the bottom, right here, look, this tells you it's a Home Connections page, and it's 138. Let's get started with looking at it. We'll talk about it for a bit, and then you'll have the time you need to finish it. So, class, problem 5 is asking us to represent each fraction on the fraction bar. Then sketch and name an equivalent fraction on the bar below it. So in our example, they're giving us 2 fraction strips to compare in order to find equivalent fractions, which you can see over here. So our first fraction strip is divided into 3 equal parts. One of the 3 is being talked about or referred to. So that would be 1/3 of the whole. Now from here, our job is to find an equivalent fraction to 1/3. This is only one possible answer. There are others. So what I needed to do is I needed to divide my fraction bar into 6 equal parts. And lining up my fraction bars, realizing 2 of the 6 is the same as 1 of the 3. So this is an example of equivalent fractions. If we look at 5a together, I'm starting off with 1/4. It's divided into 4 equal parts, and this fraction is talking about 1 of the 4. There are lots of equivalent fractions to 1/4. My job right now is to find one equivalent fraction to 1/4. So it's already divided into fourths. I'm going to divide it further up into eighths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So my denominator is 8. And I'm noticing that if I line up here and shade in here, I will need 2/8 to equal 1/4. This is not the only answer. but that's the one that I decided to go with. So continuing on, students, your job is now to tackle problem 5B with that same idea. Then on the bottom, there is a story problem, and I'll give you a couple of strategies that I want you to try to see which one works best for your thinking. And sometimes mathematicians like to use one strategy, but then also explore and try another strategy to see if they can get the same answer. That kind of validates that they're on the right track with their answer when you're able to use more than one strategy and get the same answer. So our story problem is about Mariana. Oops, let's go back down to it. Mariana, and she got a long piece of red ribbon from her aunt. She gave 1/4 of the ribbon to her little sister. She gave 2/6 of the ribbon to her best friend. So from here, we need to decide who got more of the ribbon, the little sister or the best friend. And then we're comparing 1/4 to 2/6. Are they equivalent to each other? And which one is smaller and which one is larger? And then C is just asking us to somehow prove our work, show how we are getting to our answer. And there could be lots of different ways to do that. And those would be the different strategies that you would work through and try. For example, a strategy you could use is drawing fraction strips to compare fractions. Now that would entail a really steady hand, because if the fractions are close, one might be just a little bit smaller than the other. Then if you have your pictures that are not neat and organized and really lined up, then that's going to skew your answer. So keep that in mind. And you could also use a strategy of cross multiplication. And another strategy could be a quick common denominator, or finding a common denominator and then making equivalent fractions and comparing it that way. So let's explore the fraction strips one. And to make my point, I'm going to go ahead and make a fraction strip to represent this ribbon that Mariana is getting. And what I'm also going to do is make an exact copy. So it is going to be hard freehanding this. So that's why I'm resorting to some of these tools on my page here. All right, now you can see here is my ribbon that I'm going to be dividing into 1/4. Here is my ribbon, but I'm going to be dividing it into 2/6 because she divides it in the same ribbon up 2 different ways. So my first ribbon will be 1/4. So I'm going to divide it in half very carefully. Looks about right. And then from here, I'm going to divide my halves up into 4ths. 1, 2, 3, 4 equal parts. That's what she is giving to her little sister. So here is the 4th for little sister. Now I'm going to go ahead. She also decided to give some to her best friend, and she decided to give 2/6 to the best friend. So I'm going to divide it in half. Wait a minute. Let me get that back. Sorry about that. I'm going to start by dividing it up into 3 equal pieces. Sorry about that mistake. And from here, I'm going to divide it into my 6 equal pieces. And she gave 2/6 of the ribbon to her best friend. Now, if you really have a steady hand and you're starting with the fraction strips lined up perfectly, then your eyes should be able to eyeball which fraction is larger and which fraction is smaller. But again, you really have to have a steady hand. So sometimes this strategy, when your fractions are close, isn't always the best without having those exact fraction bars. So let's look at our quick common denominator. I can have my 1/4, and I'm comparing, oh, I'm sorry, no. This is the cross multiplication strategy. I apologize for that mistake. Cross multiplication strategy. 1/4 and 2/6. I'm comparing the fractions. I want to see, are they equivalent, or is one larger or smaller? Some people also call it like the butterfly method, because what you're doing is you are crossing this way in the problem. Some people like to kind of circle it like a little butterfly wing. You're multiplying these two numbers together. Then you're doing the same. So here you can kind of see it looks like a butterfly, and maybe kind of attach the little antenna this way. And you can see 6 versus 8. So this side would be matching with the 8. This side would be matching with the 6. And that would help you determine which one is larger and which one is smaller. 8 is larger, so this side would be the larger fraction. So that is another strategy that I know we've looked at in the past, as well as your quick common denominator could be used to help you find equivalent fractions. See if I can get rid of some of these other strategies here. There we go. A quick common denominator would be multiply the 4 and the 6 together. That would be 24. So you would want to find an equivalent fraction in 24ths. And after you do that, you could compare your numerators because your denominators are the same. And then that would tip you off to which is the smaller and which is the larger fraction. So today, students, I reminded you of some different strategies that could be used when you are comparing fractions. We looked at our cross multiplication strategy. We looked at our quick common denominator, or finding a common denominator, and then that leads us to equivalent fractions to compare. And we also looked at fraction strips. All right, I'll let you to it. And of course, reach out to any of your classroom teachers if you need help with any of these problems on student book page 271 and your home connection page 138 today. All right, thanks a lot for coming on in and watching the video, and I hope you have a really nice day today. Bye, students.